Kankakee County is still home to me. I had the chance last night, or last evening rather, while I still had the light, to drive a lot of my old haunts and smiled at those things that are still there that I remembered, and sighed at those things that are no longer there that maybe should be. But what I sensed in all of that 2.5-hour drive was a sense of possibility. It was that same sense of possibility that I felt 30-some years ago, 40-some years ago, as I was growing up in this town, that there is such possibility. And remember, when I was a young adult, and we were joking about this earlier this morning, that people still refer to the loss of Roper and A.O. Smith. That was pretty top of the mind. And yet, and some of you in this room may remember, and welcome to all of you, because you are the next leaders of this county. And so it's great that you're here. But we had a vision back in the 80s to land the third major airport here. I think the effort was called, Airport 2020. I think I still have the pin. And we were so sure that we could get an airport in Peatone or in Kankakee County. We actually staged a press event where, because everybody in the Chicago media was saying, no, we don't want a downstate airport. Nobody would ever go to a downstate airport. Downstate? So we put a driver downtown in the Loop and sent that driver at 4 o'clock in the afternoon during rush hour to O'Hare. And you remember this? And we had a driver right with him and sent that driver to Peatone, and that driver got to Peatone faster than the driver got to O'Hare. And we said, case closed. Then there was there's life after 80, because back then nobody thought anything happened south of 80. We were taken with the opportunities that were in front of us, and I'm sensing that again today. I think there was a period of time where maybe that wasn't true, but this is where this is the next part of the movement from Chicago into its suburbs. You know, as I was driving down, I don't know why, I'm sure it happens to you too, a Michael Stanley band song popped into my head, the song My Town. And you know, this old town is where I learned about loving. Sadly, this town is where I learned to hate. This town has done its share of shoving. This town taught me that it's never too late. It's like there was a great 70s movie with Italian race car drivers, and a guy was saying, well, how do you race differently in Italy? And he takes the rearview mirror off of the windshield and throws it, and he goes, everything that happened before doesn't matter. You don't look back. You only look forward. So greetings from Madison, which is where I make my home today. You cut me, I'm going to bleed Badger Red. I'm an alum. But I also bleed Kankakee Green. And when I watch, and I do watch, the news over the past number of years, I have sighed, I have cried, I have been excited when things are starting to happen. And again, that sense of possibility today, I think, is pretty exciting. And you know, I didn't want to leave Kankakee County, but I did because somebody dangled money in front of me. That shouldn't be the reason. I left here for a better paying job. And I think that we all, I don't want to lecture you, but I think that there is kind of this sense of well, but it's Kankakee. We don't pay that well because it's Kankakee. We really need to get over that because we lose some of the best and the brightest. Not that I was the best and the brightest by any stretch of the imagination, but that's the only reason I left. We loved it here. We never would have left this community had it not been for the lure of more money. Now, as I said, it's never too late. And I think that maybe could be your new slogan. Because in my time in destination marketing, I have learned, I think, a really important fact. And that is, and you know, people forget that when I got to Madison, half of the downtown Capitol Square was papered over and boarded up and closed. Half of arguably one of the most beautiful Capitol Squares in the country, with a vibrant university just 7 or 8 blocks away, the seat of government, and half of the storefronts are closed. I often joke that there weren't even hookers downtown at 6 o'clock because there was no one to hook. The town, there were 3 restaurants downtown and 1 was a McDonald's. Today there's 53 restaurants downtown. Today there's not a square foot of office space that's leasable. And they're building more. They're building residential. Madison has become this amazing Renaissance story, and people forget, because we're on all these top 10 lists. Some deserved, some probably not. It was pretty horrible when I got there in 1990, and one thing happened, and I saw it happen in Madison, and then I began to see it happen around the country, and that is when government gets serious and puts their flag in the ground and says, we are not going to abandon downtown, we are not going to abandon this riverfront, we are not going to just passively walk away, as sadly our community leaders did back in the 80s when we lost Roper and Ayo. I remember talking to the then mayor saying, hey, and he says, that's not our job. Yeah, economic development is your job. But they didn't think that way back then, and so they passively let the whole thing kind of play out. But what I realize is when government does that and puts a flag in the ground and says, no more, we're going to make this thing rock, the private sector takes over and does the rest. A great case study is from Greenville, South Carolina. Some of you may have been to Greenville before. If you've been in the past 10 years, I mean, what an amazing downtown. But if you were there 20 years ago, it was nothing but strip clubs and college bars and a fair amount of decay. And the city, the mayor said, no more. He says, we're going to buy that block and we're going to fix it. And they did. And the following year, the mayor says, all right, that worked pretty well. Now we're going to do the one right next to it. We're going to buy that block and we're going to fix it. And as the mayor got ready to say, and now we're going to do this, he didn't have to. Because the private sector saw those 2 blocks and saw potential, saw money, saw opportunity, and they took out the next 8 blocks on their own over the next 3 years. And now it's also one of the great Renaissance stories in this country. But it really comes down to taking the wheel. And you have to. You have to be intentional about destination development. And I think that's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm hearing. And I'm talking to Stacy, talking to the mayor. I love that word, intentional. And I think that we have been organic and passive in the past in this community, but intentional, and be that. So here's what I'd love to share with you today is, people view the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and I said I wasn't going to tell this story, but I will. So before I got into destination marketing and destination development, I worked at a little FM radio station called The Bus. Some of you remembered it as BYG. Yeah. I was the morning guy. And the morning guy is paid to do one thing, make fun of stuff. So when this organization was formed, the Kankakee County CVA at the time, in 1983-84, I was unmerciful. For days, I made fun of the people behind this organization, going, come on, there's nothing to do here. There's no tourism here. What a waste of money. Oh my God, I can't believe that they're actually thinking that they're going to get people to come here. 6 or 7 months later, I'm the new executive director of this organization. And about 3 months after they hired me, one of my board members said, hey, wait a minute. Were you Bill Taylor? I'm so busted. I said, yeah, I was. But the reason I tell the story is because most of us, Joe and Jill Public, a lot of you understand, and you will at the end of this half hour, the people out there don't understand that this is a visitor's destination. People do come here. And using the word tourism sometimes throws people, because you think tourism, you think beaches and theme parks and stuff like that. But this is a visitor destination. And you know how I know? You have 1,000 hotel rooms in the county. Let's just say you're running at 50% occupancy, because it's easier on the math. You're running much hotter than that. And let's just assume everybody is sleeping alone tonight, which we also know is not true. You know what that means? There are 500 people in this county every night, at minimum, that don't belong here. That's 500 people who have to eat somewhere. Hoteliers, restaurants depend on these individuals. And you know they're going to gas up before they leave, and they're going to buy something to take home. At minimum, you have 500 people in this county every single day. And on weekends and event days, you know you've got way more coming in. Some stay the night, some don't stay the night, but this is and always has been a visitor's destination. So what I want to share with you is why we do what we do in destination marketing. You may hear me say DMO. DMO and CVB are kind of interchangeable. Convention and Visitors Bureau is what we are, this organization. But about 10 or 12 years ago, we kind of hit upon the realization that, you know, a lot of us don't have convention centers, and bureau sounds kind of bureaucratic. So people didn't understand what it is we did. And so we changed it to Destination Marketing Organization, which is what we do. We market the destination. And now we've kind of evolved into something bigger, which is we also help develop the destination, because if not for us, who's going to do that? And even if we have really sophisticated and driven political leaders to do that destination development, will they do it in such a way that it'll appeal to visitors? Because you can build something, but if you build it backwards, then visitors can't find it, then we've missed an opportunity. So having that voice at the table as a DMO, CVB, is crucial, because you know, our elected officials know what residents want, what we want, but do they know what the visitor wants? And we bring that voice to them. The very first DMO, CVB, although they didn't call it then, was in 1896 in Detroit, Michigan. Now think about this. In 1896, there was no national media. So how would anybody out east, which is where all the money was, know that this is about to become the Motor City if they have enough money to invest in plants and people to build these new things called cars? So the business people in the town got together and tried to figure out, okay, how do we communicate to those people out there? And somebody, that person's name is lost to history, somebody came up with the idea, why don't we put somebody on the road and send them out and have them meet with all the meeting planners? They called them congresses back then. There are national meetings that are happening all over this country. Let's convince people to put their national meeting in Detroit, because nobody's going to come here on their own. Sound familiar? But they're going to have to come if the Congress is here. It's exactly what happened. So they did not start the first Convention and Visitors Bureau to fill hotel rooms or to fill ballrooms. They did it as an economic development strategy. And as sophisticated and as convoluted as our world has gotten over the years, we're beginning to realize that that idea from 1896 is exactly what it's about today. This is far more than heads in beds. And that's what people say about what we do, right? You've heard that before, that the mission of a Convention and Visitors Bureau is heads in beds. It's cute and it rhymes, but we got to stop saying that. Because honestly, it limits what we do. It diminishes our impact, and it makes us special interest. Yeah, heads in beds is not the prime directive. It is the prime result, because those people that we get to stay in our hotels, on average, will spend 3 times as much as somebody who just comes in for the day. That's what we want. But if it's all about hotels, then our website should be one page with a list of all the hotels. And that doesn't make any sense. You gotta have a reason to come to a place. So as we say, it's not just heads in beds, but it's also cheeks and seats, right? Great olive burger, I gotta tell you. It's also torsos through turnstiles, right? It's feet on the streets at our festivals, and it's fans in the stands, and it's more in the store. It's all of that. And what we do in destination marketing is we help generate jobs, maintain jobs. With more people coming into town, more entrepreneurs will start new companies. We'll need more people in all sectors of the economy to service those people as they come. The opportunities are there. And you know something? Hospitality gets a bad rap, that it's low pay, no benefit. But I'm sorry, during a recession, any job is important. And frankly, research is showing that if you start in hospitality, regardless of what career you end up with, you'll make like more money over the history of your career because you learn tools of the hospitality trade that benefits you as you go on. And it's also been shown in research that if you decide to stay in hospitality, it's the fastest path to management of any industry on the planet. So when people kind of push back and say hospitality jobs aren't worthy, we need to push back as a community and say that that's an elitist point of view. Every job's a great job, and these are jobs that give you a great start into other things. We're also really good about taxes, right? We generate sales tax, we generate hotel room tax. We also generate property tax. And people forget that, and we haven't done a very good job of communicating that to the masses. Because let's think about it. The way property tax works in most communities, I think, is the value of the land is dictated by the profitability of the business on it. So if the business is really kicking, taxes are going to go up. And the owner's not going to mind, because business is good. But what happens if a hotel loses 15% occupancy and starts to go down the drain? Then that assessment's going to go down, which means that the city and the county are going to extract less money from that business because it's not as profitable, which means now the city's got a budget hole. And what's the city going to do with the budget hole, right? Two things: raise taxes, which we don't want, decrease services, which we don't want. So it behooves us to tell the story. Interestingly, we did some work in Pensacola, and they took my thoughts to heart and actually did a study about how much property tax comes out of their downtown core. Now, you don't have a lot of hotel properties in downtown cores, but in their downtown core in Pensacola, 40% of the property tax generated from the downtown comes from hotels. Just imagine what would happen if their tourism industry would take a body blow. It would be terrible for the city. We know that tourism breaks down walls. This is the softer side of what we do. There's that great Mark Twain quote that travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and that is true. As we travel and as we welcome people in, those ugly sides of who we are as human beings tend to go away. And as I said, for the non-believers, anybody who doesn't believe that this is a tour, as I didn't back in 1980, whatever it was, hit them with that 1,000 hotel room thing. I always see the light bulb go on. When you say, there are at least 500 people here every day, not just weekends, not just in the summer, every day, who need a place to eat. But here's the key. Tourism is economic development, probably in one of its purest forms. And who can argue with the need for economic development? And I think that we all in our sector thought that there was an impact if somebody would come to a town, and for those of you that travel, I would think that you're the same. Unless you're married to the land, when you travel someplace else, don't you put yourself in their shoes and go, I could live here, I could do this is kind of cool. I mean, I go into towns all the time, I was doing it last night, and going, oh, I want that building, because I could make that thing sing. So we actually had a firm called Longwoods International that went about trying to prove that notion, that if you've been to a place, you're more likely to invest in a place, you're more likely to want to live in a place that you visited. Turns out it's more so than we ever thought. So here's what they did. They got a sample size, amazing, of 18,000 people. The filter to get into the sample was you could not have been in any one of 10 destinations that they were going to test, right? Illinois was not one of the ones they tested, but they did test Wisconsin and a couple other Midwest states. So I've just picked 4 because it's easier on the eyes. But they asked the question, do you strongly agree that this would be a good place to live? These are people who have never been to any of these states. And so there you go. Wisconsin, never having seen an ad, never having visited, 30% of Americans said, sounds like a good place. That means 70% of Americans don't think that Wisconsin would be a good place. That's not good. Showed these 18,000 people a 30-second tourism ad from all of these destinations. The answer to the question went up 10 to 15% in every state, every one they looked at. They then said, do you think it'd be a good place to go to college? There are your starter numbers, never having seen an ad, never having visited. Boom, showed them an ad, 10 to 15% growth in likability just by seeing an ad. And here is the big one. Do you think it'd be a good place to start a business? Yeah, sure enough. Show them a 30-second tourism ad, bingo. 10 to 15% growth. They then followed those 18,000 people for a year, came back with the survey and said, hey, did you go to any of the places you saw an ad for? And the people who did were 10 to 15% more likely again. So you have the ability, by inviting somebody with an ad and then hosting them, to have a 30% bump in likability. That's huge. That's why this isn't heads and beds. This is being the first date for economic development. I don't care how much money you throw into the Economic Development Council, we help open the doors. We help plow the road. We make their slog not nearly as arduous, because when economic development calls, they've heard about Kankakee County. They go, oh yeah, I'm hearing cool things. You know, tell me about that riverfront plan, or tell me about this, or tell me about what's happening in Manteno. I mean, tell me about that. Because they've heard about it from PR, advertising, digital, social media, whatever it is. By just getting that word out, it's a huge boom for economic development. And you know something they know that it is? The economic development folks, and they're starting to admit that they know. This is Jeff Maehl. He used to be the head of the Economic Development Unit in Chicago. He's currently heading up their Amazon bid. And he says every tourist that comes through here, Chicago, is a potential business lead. That's how he views it. And his office continues to, since he's been gone, but they work hand in hand with Choose Chicago, their CVB. And this is Steve Moore from Phoenix. And he says our economic development office doesn't go on the road because the low-hanging fruit is already coming here for our events. What this is all about is the pursuit of the creative class. And some of you are familiar with that book. I can't believe it's been over 15 years since it came out. Richard Florida, a renowned author and researcher on economies and growing cities. And he identified a trend that frankly started pretty much, I call it the cultural revolution of the 60s. I mean, we all lived a certain way up until like the Beatles, and then everything changed. And that's when, I mean, it used to be manufacturing and service. Those were the two sectors. That's what we did in this country. We built stuff and we serviced stuff. But when the 60s exploded, there was a new sector, and he called it the creative class. People who make money with their minds, people who design the stuff that we're going to make, who create music and theater and architecture and all of that. And he says, and honestly, this is one of the reasons he's come back around. I'm waiting for the next book. He's come back around and said, you know, he says, even I didn't see it coming, but this is the reason why Donald Trump is president. He says, because the creative class are primarily left-leaning, and the manufacturing and service class tend to be right-leaning, and these guys weren't being heard, and they were losing jobs. And whether he knew what he was doing or not, or his handlers did, tapped into the fact that the creative class had gotten kind of snooty. And all the TV shows were about the creative class. You know, it's an interesting facet, but creative class, and it doesn't have to mean just millennials and Gen Z. Creative class can be, I was talking to a restaurateur in Sarasota, Florida once, and he says, I want the creative class, but he goes, I want 45-year-old creative class people. He says, because they're capitalized, they have money. He goes, I love the younger ones, but that's what we want. But that's what every city, every county needs, is an influx of creative class individuals, the people who will power the entrepreneurial growth of a destination. And there's a new understanding of urbanism. This is Peter Kajiyama, wrote a great book called For Love of Cities. And a Gallup poll found that communities with the greatest engagement, where the people are engaged in committees and task forces and are being tapped in leadership roles, have the greatest domestic product growth from that city or county. I mean, the output becomes bigger, business becomes more successful. You know, fixing potholes is important, but that's like giving your spouse a fire extinguisher for Christmas or their birthday. I mean, a DMO helps stitch the soul of a city together, and that's what we do. One of the other studies that I'd like to talk to you about, it comes from CEO for Cities, a kind of a think tank of CEOs that are trying to reimagine what urban life should be in our major cities. And they did an interesting study about young professionals. And you know, they found that, I mean, the millennial cohort, largest population group in the history of man and women, also the most mobile generation in history. And those of us that watch generational trends, I think, expected them to be mobile for their lives, because they're just, I mean, you know, my 28-year-old daughter's on her 4th city. I just figured that would just continue forever. In fact, when they turn about 33, on average, they're putting down roots, which means they're not that dissimilar from their parents, they're just 5 years late, because they want to travel before they put down those roots. So if that's the case, the economic developer in me sees and hears one thing. If we don't get 20-somethings into Kankakee County for a visit, they're not going to move here. We have got to be on their list for consideration. Everything, this is about the long-term sustainability of Kankakee County and our communities, is if we don't get them here as a visitor, our population will continue to drop. And that's a problem for all of us. It's a problem for the tax base. It's a problem for sustainability. It's just, it is. So I hope I've made the case that it's economic development in one of its purest forms. One of the thought leaders in our industry is Maura Gast. She is the CEO of the Irving, Texas Convention and Visitors Bureau. And this is what she has in her signature line on all of her emails. She said, right under where it says Visit Irving, says this is cash in hand economic development delivered immediately by visitor spending. Economic development work takes months, it takes years. Tourism, CVB work, destination marketing, we can see them tomorrow. They see something that's compelling enough and inspiring enough, they'll hop in their cars and they'll be here tomorrow. Cash in hand, economic development delivered immediately. She also just nailed what we do in a kind of a, what is that children's book? If you give the dog, bear, mouse, if you give a mouse a cookie, okay, it's kind of one of those. So here it is. If you build a place where people want to visit, you're going to build a place where people want to live. If you build a place where people want to live, you're going to build a place where people have to work. If you build a place where people want to work, you're going to build a place where business wants to be. And if you build a place where business wants to be, you're back to building a place that people want to visit. It all starts with that visit, and that is what your DMO is really all about. Visitors power our quality of life. And frankly, there is something really compelling about a community like Kankakee County where the cost of living is a lot less than the big cities. And while millennials, mostly millennials, have raced to live in the city, again, they're now realizing in their 30s that I kind of would like to be out in the country. I'd like it to be more of a healthful environment. I'd like not to spend as much money on rent. I mean, you know, what did I see? The average cost of a house in San Francisco is something like $700,000. That's the average house. They say that you can't have a 2-bedroom apartment in San Francisco unless you're making like something like $70,000. It's just insane. Well, people are starting to figure that out. And so this is really, you know, this is a compelling argument for people to come, and we just need to show them. Now, here's the thing. This industry has changed so much from when I got into it back in the 80s. As I say, the rules of the game have changed. There isn't even a rule book anymore. I mean, there used to be, every single CVB had an org chart that looked like everybody else's org chart, right? And we now realize that just one size doesn't fit all. What's important to this community may not be important to another. Let me give you an example. And they're all fairly local examples. So Madison. So we built our convention center designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. And within 3 years, the county went, oh, looks shiny, and they built one too. So now we have 2 convention centers. And both the city and the county contract with our Convention and Visitors Bureau and essentially say, fill the buildings. So you don't see a lot of advertising from Madison about, hey, come for the weekend. You should, it's a great town. But you don't see that because that's not what's important to the people who fund our organization. They say, if you don't fill these buildings, we're gonna take the contract and do something else with it. So they are absolutely focused on conventions, sports, and major events. Rockford, Illinois, doesn't have a convention center, doesn't even have a hotel downtown, but as you may know, have amazing sports facilities. They are probably 80% focused on landing sports tournaments, youth and adult, amateur, right? That's what they do. It's completely different than what Madison does, and yet it's an hour and change apart. Okay, go west an hour or so. Galena. They don't have sports fields. They don't have a convention center. That is a 100% leisure tourism play. How can 3 convention and visitors bureaus so close be so incredibly different in what they do? It's because they've all realized they're going to play to their strength. They're going to play to what they have and who they are. We're not just marketers. We don't just place ads. But you know something? This CVB never did. This CVB, as I look back on it, and I can't take any credit for it, but this CVB was actually a groundbreaker back in the 80s. Because this CVB went out and helped run the Nationals. Really? We had a national championship here for what, 20, however many years. We bid on it, we put together the prize packages, we did all of the advertising and the sponsorship. I mean, our office came to an absolute shutdown by the 4th of July, and that's all we did. From the 4th of July to Labor Day was work on the boat races. The Criterium, which I guess is still happening, right? Around Cobb Park? Is it still, you still doing it? We started that. This organization, along with some cycling club out of the South Side, decided that would be the perfect Criterium course. This organization had a hand in starting the Criterium. And the Fishing Derby, same thing. We hooked up with the Northern Illinois Anglers Association and did the Fishing Derby. That was not stuff that DMOs did back then. So you've always been a groundbreaker, and while there's probably a very good reason why you're not doing the boat races anymore, because man, that is a lot of work. But it's in our DNA to be different. And so here's how I see destination marketing organizations changing across the country. Today, we are more storyteller than anything else. Because let's think about this. You know, people will say, well, why are you spending so much money on a DMO? I mean, why are you investing all that money? Because people are just going to pull out their mobile, and they've got the world. They've got Google, TripAdvisor, Yelp. You know, who needs a bureau? Good question. And so we, as an industry, have started to think differently. And that is, okay, so Yelp has got better restaurant listings than we do. Got it. What can we do that Yelp can't do? What can we do that TripAdvisor can't do, or Google can't do, or Facebook can't do? And what they can't do is they can't tell a story. And we call it curating. We're kind of like museum managers. We curate the story. We find the story, we curate the story, we share the story, and get people to think, okay, I can see that this restaurant is 4-star, and there's a lot of positive comments. I can look at their menu online. Is that going to make me drive from Chicago? Probably not. But if there's a video of the owner, the chef, somebody back of the house that has a compelling story about why they do what they do, how they do what they do, yeah, I want to check that out. That's pretty cool. And the other platforms can't do that. So we are today more storyteller than we are, I think, almost anything else. We are also choreographers. And what I mean by that is there are, and Peter Kajiyama talks about this in his book, there are all these, he calls them co-creators, these independent entrepreneurs who see an opportunity like this place and go, oh, I could do something with this. And they tend to be focused on making that business sing. And they don't necessarily see a partnership with another business that makes both of them a more compelling reason for people to visit and a more compelling reason for people to give them their money, right? My favorite example is from Columbus, Ohio. There was a guy, this is about 6 or 7 years ago now, who decided that what Columbus needed was a business where you could make your own candle. Okay. Now, my apologies to any candle freaks out here. That doesn't sound like fun to me at all. But he had a system where you could pick your own medium, you could pick the color, pick the scent, and you make the candle, and you get to go home with the candle that you make, right? Okay, well, you can imagine it's not working very well. So he calls on the CVB and he says, guys, can you give me some social media love this weekend? Because I'm not sure I'm going to make payroll. This is just not working. And the Bureau said, hey, have you met the guy down the block who has the wine tasting room? And in true entrepreneurial fashion, he went, there's a wine tasting room down the block? He had no idea. The two of them got together, and I mean, this is brilliant. I mean, I don't want to make a candle, but make a candle with a flight of wine? I'm in. They just opened their 4th location. It worked. And it worked because the Bureau is a choreographer, right? One of the other things, I'm going to lose you here because everybody always watches the video, but what we need to be is mindful and intentional about our nighttime economy. That's where I think so many smaller communities fall down, is especially when you're as close to Chicago as we are, is, if they eat at 5 or 6, they can go home. We got to figure out ways to keep them here, and that tends to be music, to a degree drama and comedy, but to become and the music heritage of this region is powerful, especially the city of Kankakee. But even Manteno, I mean, some of the best bands I ever saw, I saw at Missing Persons. Anybody remember Missing Persons? Yep, it's gone. See, it's been a long time since I've been here. But we had a steady flow of the up-and-coming bands coming down to Manteno, Kankakee. There was a club in Bradley that had them all the time. I remember seeing, I can't even think of their names now, but this really hot all-girl group when that was a big deal. That didn't happen. Played at, oh God, I can't even think of the name of it now, but it's just a little cinder block hut on Route 50. What can we do? How do we empower people? How do we clear the path either through permitting or zoning or whatever it is to get that back, to get music back into our lives? Because every 15 minutes you can keep somebody here after dinner, there's one more chance that you're going to get them into a hotel for the night. And if they're at the hotel for the night, then they're going to probably have breakfast here, and who knows, they may even stay a couple. The nighttime economy is crucial to the growth of a destination. And we are the keepers of the calendar, okay? We are the ones that beyond any other organization, should be the ones where if it's happening in this community, if it's happening in this county, we're the source for that. And hopefully, locals use it for that too, right? I mean, the old school was you don't market to locals because they don't spend the night. They still spend money. And what's wrong with marketing to somebody, in Manteno to come to Aroma Park and somebody, from Bradley to go somewhere else? I mean, that's still all good money. There was a researcher out of Purdue a number of years ago who said that what our jobs should be is, well, the premise is there's good money, bad money, and neutral money, okay? Good money is the money that comes into Kankakee County from other people, because it's our money now. Bad money is the money that we take and we blow in Chicago or Vegas. That's bad money, it's gone. We're never gonna see that money again. And neutral money is the money that we spend within the county. He said, and I still think this is brilliant, he says the job of the DMO should be, but rarely is, to increase good money, decrease bad money, and speed the velocity of neutral money, right? And I remember him speaking to that, and I walked up to him after the speak, and I said, we only do the first one. We don't do 2 and 3. He says, I know. Who does? Shouldn't there be somebody trying to stop money from leaving? Stop people from going to the suburbs or Chicago or wherever? Shouldn't somebody be trying to stop that outflow of cash? And shouldn't somebody be trying to get people from this county to love this county and move around this county and spread their wealth among all the businesses? Makes a good point. Ultimately, what this is all about is, and the pun is intended, what makes you outstanding in your field? What is the one thing that Kankakee County has that nobody else has. And that gets to our brand building. That gets to the role of your destination marketing organization being about a brand identity and nurturing that brand and making sure that people, when they say Kankakee County, conjure up a great image. Because you know something? It was a great town. I mean, this is a shot of downtown Kankakee that was featured in Life in what, the 40s, maybe the 50s? I mean, look at that. It's astounding what this place was and what this place can be. And frankly, I think the only thing that holds you back is pride. And the hardest part about pride is the people who have lived through the down times forget that we are now into good times. And they still are saying the same tired cliche about, oh, it's Kankakee County, oh, it's this, oh, you know, last one out, turn off the lights. I mean, I remember those bumper stickers too. It's pride. I think that the DMO has a role in that too, and that's something that we didn't do as destination marketing organizations as late as 10 years ago. But if our own people aren't inviting their friends and relatives to come and visit, we're forfeiting a huge opportunity, I think. And here's part of the problem. It's bad news. There was a time when bad news in the newspaper, because you know, radio and TV, it's said, and it's gone. Newspapers would stick around for a couple days, but they tended to be only read by locals, and pretty soon they were used for, you know, the parakeet cage or wrapping fish. So bad news didn't stick. Today with the internet, it's like luggage. Never get rid of it. It sticks. So everything that is reported in a negative manner about this place is online for all to see for all time. Let me tell you a story. Well, first off, let me ask you about your brand image of Oakland, California. I mean, when you hear, unless you've been there recently, if you hear Oakland, what do you think? Gritty, grimy, dirty, crime-infested, gang-infested, right? That's what you think of Oakland, California. You know, the percentage of violent crime is actually higher per capita in San Francisco, that gleaming city on a hill, than it is in Oakland. More crime, worse crime in San Francisco. This is Oakland, okay? Here's what happened. They went to the local university and they said, look, there's got to be a reason beyond that the San Francisco media just likes to kick us. There's got to be a reason why there's so many bad stories that then get picked up by the national media. Because, I mean, you hear Oakland and you think crime. That's not the case. So they did the analysis and they found out something fascinating. It turns out that the San Francisco media reports crime in San Francisco by neighborhood. They report crime in Oakland by the word Oakland. So when the bots come through and scrape for the national and international news, they go right by the Presidio, they go right by 4th and Vine, they go right by any neighborhood in San Francisco because they don't know what that is, but they catch on Oakland. Up the story goes for the world to read, to reinforce a bad, negative stereotype about Oakland. The Bureau took that information to the media and said, guys, and interestingly, the media went, oh my, we had no idea. Well, that we will stop. We will start doing neighborhoods in Oakland. We'll report the same way we report San Francisco. We will not use the word Oakland. Have you heard of very many bad stories coming out of Oakland over the past 3 years? No. Because the media said, aha, this is hurting the entire economy. People are choosing not to move here because these bad stories are getting picked up by the national media. Once the media changed so that the media needs to tell the bad stories locally. Just don't make it easy for the national media to grab them, okay? And that's one of the things that we found in Oakland. Rockford, Illinois, same kind of a thing, but totally on a social media basis. And if you know Rockford, this poor building, the Amarok building has just been an eyesore for as long as I think I have ever remember being in Rockford. It just sits there in their downtown core. And Over time, the Bureau there has very stealthily done a social media campaign that essentially is saying how great Rockford is. And I mean, they have the same problem that we do. The lifers in town go, oh, Rockford, I hate Rockford. It's the new recruits, it's the people who have moved into town that think it's pretty cool and are finding ways to invest. And what's happening is that Bureau is really giving light and air to those stories. And it's funny because on the Bureau's Facebook page, you will just as often see a post like, oh, did you see who they picked for school superintendent? She's inspiring. It's going to be great for schools. Wait, this is a tourism website. No, any good news that Bureau is amplifying, regardless of whether it's visitor related or resident related. And pretty soon people start, I mean, the no birds eventually can be, if not toned down, they can be met with an equal amount of positive force. So I don't know if you saw, but very recently, they had a groundbreaking at that same building. And in a year or two, that will be their first downtown hotel in Rockford, Illinois. I think it's about new voices. I think it's about and I'm not being Pollyannish here, but I told you, I follow your media. I'm always watching. I'm still a Kankakee boy. You know Gary Moore? Do you read Gary Moore in the Journal? Gary has this amazing column that I think it's probably weekly that just is a, hey, I could live anywhere. I live, I don't know, did he sell it? I live in a freaking $3 million house. I could be anywhere in the world and I choose to be in Kankakee County. And this is why. That's the kind of story people want to hear. That's the message that we want to amplify wherever we can. And that's really, honestly, I think it's the news we crave, isn't it? Aren't we tired of the bad news? Aren't we inspired by the entrepreneurial startup, by the person who reaches out and takes care of a brother? I think that's where media needs to go, because I think, frankly, we're all getting pretty tired. And I don't want this to be an indictment of the media at all. I mean, hey, they give voice to Gary Moore. But I think we need to understand that it's time. It's time to move into, a different kind of news, a different kind of messaging, and just back to pride. Just say, yeah, I'm from Kankakee County. Love it there. I mean, I miss it. I really do. Last night I was just flooded with emotion because honestly, it had been, boy, easily 8 years since I've been back. And what I'm seeing is pretty amazingly cool. So with that, I want to share with you just a couple last thoughts, and that is, this organization markets this destination, but they can't do it alone. They need every person in this room to do it too. When you see a post, maybe from their Facebook page or a Twitter post, give it air, move it up. I mean, you've all seen the charts. You know what social media can be. I mean, one person posting is great, but the more shares and the more retweets and reposts, it just exponentially takes off, and who knows, becomes viral. And that's what we want. We want to share our destination with the world. We want people to come here. We want people to see our quality of life. We want people to feel invited here. And ultimately, we have to love this destination to its core. My name is Bill Geist. I truly believe that destination marketing is transformative to the way we are going to build our communities going forward. And I encourage you all to continue to be engaged as you are today in coming to this. And I encourage all of you, don't leave. I mean, kids always leave. We always want to go to the big city. There's so much opportunity here, and you're the next leaders. So with that, thank you again for the opportunity to join you. I think we've got a few minutes. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have or hear any great stories, and we could swap some that are true and some that are lies, and I got plenty of both. So with that, thanks everybody for coming out. Appreciate it. Thank you.